Hello everyone and welcome back to 33 Founders. Tonight, and this morning, we are delighted to be joined by Valerie Wagoner, the co-founder of ZipDial. So thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you guys.
So can we just start out with you describing ZipDial and the need that your company is fulfilling in this emerging market?
Yeah, absolutely. So in emerging markets like India, Brazil, Indonesia, there's essentially almost zero data on consumers at any kind of personalized level. People pay for things with cash. They are not yet connected on mobile internet for the most part. I mean, even the 85% of Indian mobile phone owners who have a smartphone, only 1 out of 3 of those actually has a data connection. So people are essentially invisible or anonymous when it comes to understanding their likes, dislikes, preferences, behaviors. So our whole thesis is, create a simpler, better experience for users that drives much more engagement and therefore data that can give them a better personalized experience and better serve advertisers. So people are getting relevant things from marketers rather than spam.
Can you explain how ZipDial works too, the process?
Yeah, so from the user's perspective, the idea is that it starts in the real world, if you will, with any kind of print advertisement, television, even a product package for that matter. And there's a very simple call to action. Most often, though not necessarily, it's a dialing call to action, which in India is known as a missed call, where the call essentially rings once and hangs up on purpose. Or in Africa, it's called flashing. In Eastern Europe, it's called beeping. In the Philippines, they spell it MISKOL. But this is one example of how emerging markets users behave differently. The idea of signaling each other by dialing missed calls. And we applied that to that's the absolute simplest way for anyone to respond to an advertisement or express their answer to a survey or whatever, or check in at a retailer or whatever the use case may be. So that's one example. Effectively the response could be, and the follow-up engagement is targeted to the user based on their profile and based on the type of phone they have. So if I'm a user sitting in, rural Bihar in Northeast India, and I am responding to a local language radio ad, I need to get a callback in a voice message where, there's a voice recording talking to me about the brand. But if I'm sitting in Mumbai, clicking on a Facebook ad on my Android device, I need to get a text and data-based experience that probably quickly prompts me to download an application. So it may be the same brand and the same exact campaign, but depending on the user and depending on what device they're using, the interface, whether it be text, voice, WAP, apps, is targeted to that user.
Mm-hmm. So brands are seeing a ton more social engagement than through social media platform. They have greater analytics and a larger ROI on performance by using ZipDial. Can you explain why companies need to embrace this approach in emerging markets and what's going to happen if they don't get on board with that?
I think you said it really well in that it's really about results and it's really about ROI. And first things first, you need to have the maximum number of people participating. So let's just take a very simple example of, say, probably half of the biggest e-commerce players in India are our customers and using ZipDial for things like driving app downloads. So there might be a billboard on the highway or a newspaper ad or a television ad promoting Flipkart or Snapdeal or Quicker or the big e-commerce or Amazon is another customer of ours over here. And ultimately they want to drive more app downloads. India is a mobile first kind of economy and that's how people will be transacting a lot. So the simple experience is to respond to the ad by dialing, and the instant response targets the user based on what type of phone they have, whether or not they have mobile internet, and gets them to click through and download the application. Now, inevitably, you may or may not be in a good mobile data coverage at that moment. Very often, phones slip from 3G into Edge, and you can't actually complete the download at that point. So the platform knows what behaviors the user has taken, whether they clicked through or not, what OS they have, etc., and can therefore retarget the user over time to gradually convert more and more users to complete the download of the application. So that's just a very simple example where all you're trying to do is get the user to convert from the ad to downloading an app. But given the reality of the fact that mobile internet is not necessarily accessible to everyone, or even if they have it, it's not on all the time, or the network coverage isn't good enough. So that's a very direct kind of example. So someone like Flipkart is is able to get a 33% conversion from their ad, response to the ad to full download. Amazon is getting 50%. So they're, understanding beyond that, knowing the media attribution. So they're advertising in television, outdoor ads, print, even when you sit in the plane and on the back of the seat in front of you, there's a Flipkart ad, or on the baggage tag that's tied onto your suitcase, there's an ad for Flipkart and their application. So they're using different ZipDial numbers across all of those many different media to track where a response is coming from. Like, imagine Google Analytics, where you know where clicks are coming from, but here this is ZipDial Analytics for the real world telling you where your response is coming from. What are those conversion rates through the flow? Is television more, maybe television gets me more responses, but the baggage tags are, a much higher conversion rate to download. And so therefore, how should I plan my media spend in order to drive results most effectively?
And you guys you guys call it analytics for the offline world, right?
Yeah. It's really all about, how do you surface data that was never before accessible and create insights and analytics from the offline world. And for the user, it's all about that offline-online bridge. I think the app download kind of example is a nice illustrative example of how, creating that offline-online bridge. A more relevant example for most of our customers, we do most of our work with consumer packaged goods, so Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Mondelez, Pepsi, Coke, Nestle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about how do you understand similar kind of media attribution and audience measurement. So how are my ads performing based on who's engaging? How is that increasing brand awareness? What audience am I reaching? So understanding how to profiling those users after they're engaged. And then ultimately, like you said, it's about driving real results. In the CPG case, it's all about product trials and repeat purchases. So for example, Axe deodorant on a Facebook ad, having a click to ZipDial kind of ad experience where the user starts online, but it becomes an offline ZipDial experience, reminding that user to go purchase the product. On the product that's sitting on the shelf, there's a unique code where the user is, through a ZipDial experience, redeeming that unique code on the package and verifying that they've purchased the package. Now keep in mind, of course, that 90% of trade happens in cash and in general trade shops where there's no point of sale, nobody's swiping a credit card, there's no data about who's purchasing what. So the fact that now, say a Unilever can understand who responded to their television ad versus their Facebook ad and what was their propensity to go and purchase that product and maybe even repeat purchase that product later, that's incredibly powerful data and insights on campaign performance. And then beyond that, it's about, in a very privacy protected and personalized way, being able to retarget to that user in their offline online world. And and if it's someone who is purchasing twice a month, get them to try a new flavor. If it's someone who's only purchased once and has lapsed, get them to purchase a second time, whatever the right kind of behavior change is that's targeted to that user.
Awesome. And now, in light of partnerships, I've seen some other video interviews where you've addressed the importance of just minimizing risk, the perception of that for investors. So I'm just curious how you go about doing that for giant companies like the ones you're talking about, Pepsi, Disney.
Yeah, it's all about case studies, and you by hook or by crook, you have to somehow get your first customer, and you have to make them successful. So as soon as you get that customer, you make them successful, and then you talk about it loudly, and eventually, you'll get one more and one more and one more. If you look at how our core metrics focus on brands. Mm-hmm. So within Pepsi, there's some couple dozen brands. Within Unilever, there's some 3 dozen brands. And our metrics focus on brands because each of them have their own individual budgets and their own ability to spend at different levels. So we treat them like their own individual customer. And if you look at how over the last 4 years, how our growth has been across brands within a single portfolio. So, now we're working with more than 16 Unilever brands when we started with one of their brands 3 years ago. So that kind of ramp up across, once you get one and spreading across the portfolio, and then go to the next, client. And what's interesting is you can definitely see patterns of the market being more mature and ready to take on the solution. So, for example, say P&G, in the work we've done with them they were our first major customer, 4 years ago. And over time, they grew from 1 brand to 2 brands to 3 brands over the years. But Pepsi, for example, has only been working with us since last year, and they're already working with us with 4 brands.
That's great.
So it's partly, you have to just get the ball rolling on creating the market for something, and it's it is painful to create a new market.
As you do that, Valerie, I read an article from citing your brother and some of your colleagues at eBay saying that you have an incredible knack to persuade people. Is this ability innate, or has it come as something you practice?
I think anything can be learned. Even when I, straight out of my master's, I was at Stanford. I was sitting in the Bay Area, and I had taken a job on Wall Street. I had done an internship over the summer and was planning on going back. And then I came back for my last year at Stanford and thought, you know what, I want to start companies someday. Why would I go to Wall Street? That feels like a huge detour. So I called them up and said, you know what, I'm sorry, but no thanks. And they said, what else are you going to do? I said, I don't know. It's probably the first time that's ever happened. But even at that point, it took me another 3 years to even believe in myself that I had the confidence to do it. Like I had this thing like, okay, maybe I want to start companies someday. But it took me a solid 3 years to actually have the confidence to believe in myself that, like, yes, I actually can do this and I will do this. And then it took me another 2 or 3 years to actually do it. From that perspective, like, I don't think any of this is innate. I think what has to be innate or learned is just the guts, because there's things you have to figure out every single day. And as long as you have the courage to know that you can figure it out, including persuasion, including selling, like these can be learned things. People are going to be naturally better at one thing or another. So certain people are going to be naturally better at selling and persuading. That's fine. But it can be learned. And even if you're naturally good at it, it doesn't mean that you can't stop practicing. Yeah. You have to keep improving. I have conversations all the time when I'm negotiating with someone across the table, and I'm literally taking mental notes about like, ooh, good tactic. And I'm like learning how to negotiate better as I'm in the negotiation.
Absolutely.
Can you share one of those tactics? Your last favorite one?
Oh my gosh. It's, I don't know if this is the latest favorite one, but there's all sorts of, definitely having, I regularly tell my team, for example, like, use me as the bad cop. You go ahead and play the good cop. Because I try to, push leadership and decision making to the team as much as possible. So in any kind of partner relationship or client relationship, I want them to be in the front, not me. So in many cases, that means they need to have the rapport with the customer. And often a good cop, bad cop kind of dynamic can actually be very helpful. So I'm like, okay, you be the good cop. Just go ahead and blame me for whatever you want.
Confidence is something that I really want to talk to you about, Valerie. You state in your Twitter bio that after all of this, nothing intimidates you.
Nothing.
And we recently spoke to Claire Shipman, who studies confidence, and what came out of that conversation is that confidence is the willingness to take risks. You've clearly taken a lot of risks in your life. Can you give us your take on confidence and how people can increase it?
One thing that I know has made a big difference for me, and as I said, I would never, it definitely was a journey for me to even get the confidence that I had to take more risks. And I think you just have to try, because you realize that like the downside isn't that bad, and like, oh gee, you actually succeeded, and then that boosts your confidence more. So breaking down the problem more. So that if you're, let's say, starting from point A to founding a company is like a big jump for you, right? You don't have the confidence for that. Break it down a little, like take on a side project, like, set aside a budget that's your savings that like in case it doesn't work out, you still have savings to live on. Like just breaking down the problem so that you can like get that momentum a little bit at a time, and take small risks a little bit at a time so that you realize and you become comfortable with the idea that it's okay. Like it's not that bad if you fail, and oh, by the way, you did better than you expected you would. And sometimes you don't, and sometimes you realize, oh my God, like this is too much for me. I can't handle this. And that's also an important lesson to learn. It's not that everybody should be taking risks, but learning what your thresholds are and continuing to gradually push yourself a little bit more and a little bit more. For me, I think naivety helped. Not knowing how hard something's going to be, kind of like helps you jump in. If I knew at the time how absolutely hard things were going to be, maybe I wouldn't have done it. I don't think that's true. I think I would have done it anyway. But just believing in what you're doing enough that it doesn't matter how tough it is or or how bad it might get, but it just you get the ball rolling and you get momentum, and then there's kind of no looking back.
So we want to close with this, Valerie. Since 2010, launching ZipDial, you've put on over 7,000 campaigns, which has resulted in 400 million engagements. That's pretty unheard of, and it's a really great track record moving forward. How do you plan to innovate from here?
So it's really about an evolution of, I think today, as much as we've achieved that much with the advertisers and marketers we work with, they're barely scratching the surface of the real value. Mm-hmm. I think that, the as much as they get a lot of value and keep coming back because of that value, the marketers we work with are probably only taking advantage of 5% of the value because they're not leveraging the power of the data enough. Mm-hmm. Till date, most of the usage of ZipDial has been about the value of the solutions, mm-hmm. or the value of the applications and the value of the engagement. And at a basic level, kind of understanding better transparency. I wouldn't even say analytics yet. The platform has so much capability around analytics and in particular retargeting. So once that user has engaged with your campaign, talk to them in the appropriate targeted voice next time. And whether that's only at a basic level of gender or at a basic level of have they purchased your product before or not? Are they a new user or a repeat user? But that is that's a starting point to actually leverage the power of the data more. And so it's really about deepening the strategy and the use, and there's a lot that still needs to be taken advantage of. And in addition to that, we'll constantly be innovating on the solutions side of things in terms of the different applications we're building. So a big focus lately is in trade marketing. Most of what we've done till date is more brand marketing, but there's so much in terms of retail loyalty and field sales and sampling and other trade marketing related use cases where we're building out new applications that address those opportunities. And then, of course, the user interface will continue to evolve. Soon enough in the ZipDial app you've downloaded, it will have audio detection so that you don't even have to dial on the television ad. It'll just detect that it's playing, for example. So there will those three streams of innovation: the user interface layer, the solutions layer, and then the core platform. And I think the core platform is really where most of the value is, and where there's been so little adoption or kind of embracing of that real value of the data till date. So there's huge potential in scaling that.
Well, we feel pretty confident that you're going to lead the way doing that. And we really want to thank you for joining us today. We're excited to bring this to our users.
Thanks so much. Great to talk to you.